So let's make us a new chopping block here. I've got a nice piece of ash cut here. This is a American white ash. And the only power tool we're gonna use for this project is a chainsaw, which I've already cut the piece to length. Not the prettiest cut, but that doesn't matter. So the idea here is to just take a half log, split it, rive it right in two with some wedges, and then put 4 legs in it. It's a simple project, but it is a little bit of effort because you're working some larger pieces and you've got to do boring and augering and that kind of thing. But anyway, let's hope the wind noise isn't too bad. It's actually a pretty still day for where I live, but you can see some hills off in the distance. That isn't terribly relevant to what we're doing now. Anyway, this wood is still plenty green to hew and rive, although it's going to be a little tougher because this wood has been laying on the ground for about 2 years. Not long enough for it to rot, but it has lost some of that immediate green, really easy green wood properties. And this piece, hopefully it doesn't give me too much of a problem. Hopefully it looks like it's going to be pretty straight grain, but you can see here where I sliced the end off, we had an old knot, a fork right here. You want to avoid that. You want a really straight grained, straight piece of wood to make it easier on yourself. You can use just about anything that splits easily wherever you live. Oak is great. Oak, ash, hickory, birch can work. You know, even yellow pine. I've seen them made out of yellow pine. That works fine. So anyway, enough jabbering. The idea, and I'm going to try to start out with my maul here. And all I have is an iron, very simple iron wedge. And it's important that you have your, like everything else, I've got to point out, you have to have the edge right. And these don't have to be sharp, but they need to have the right profile. It's a very thin edge, and I'll show you one over here. It's a little different where you don't want a big shoulder on it. You want a nice thin wedge here. A lot of these newer wedges that you buy at the store are absolutely ground horribly. This is an older one that's a little bit nicer, but I have reground this. So that is very important for what we're about to do for scoring. Anyway. So I don't know how well it's going to show up, but the actual core of the tree is way over right here. That's where the pith is. So you got this big wide section. And I typically like mine to be, you want the wide section, you want to cut through the wide section or rive through it. And the reason this tree has the knot way over here is because it was growing on a slope. This is why I actually cut it down, because it was about to fall over. So all we're going to start off with is score a straight line right down the middle and progressively just keep working along like a chisel until we can get the wedge seated deep enough to be able to take the sledgehammer to it. And this would probably be easier done with a small hammer, but I don't have one with me. All I've got is my big one. But this is fine for starting off. And you can draw a line with some pencil if you want. I think it's pretty easy without, but so we're not trying to beat into the wood immediately. We're just scoring a line to get the crack started. Oh, smells like the neighbors have put some fertilizer out or something. It's almost that time of year. And it can jump around a little bit on you. This doesn't have to be very precise. Just want to get a fairly straight line. All right, that was a good score. Depending on what you're doing, this can be a slower process. And you see I've got it setting on a, oh, you can't see, but it is setting on a other wooden block here. That just makes it a little easier. Yeah, and you can see right down here in the core, that's starting to stick nicely. This edge is going to be harder to rive because it's got wider growth rings. Which also makes it consequently a little harder to work, but ash is still very forgiving. Get those edges nice and started. And you are going to need at least a pair of wedges for this. I got my other one over there, which it needs to be reground, but wouldn't hurt to wear safety glasses for this, especially when you're using a sledgehammer, because these things can spall steel. Yeah, it's starting to stick. Good. This is a fairly wide piece to be doing this with. Luckily it's short. Okay. Don't go too far down on the edge. I'll bust a piece off the end. And they'll jump out on you. If they're not ready to stick, that's what they do. But it doesn't matter. Getting it good and started, that's what happens. Of course, you want to be real careful not to keep your web of your hand up here. You're gonna have a bad time. Okay, I may try to go ahead and get 2 wedges in here. I wish I could start it on that side. We'll see. Strike right in here. Get the stick. Okay. Okay. All right, I think she'll rive now. Might be able to do this entirely with the maul. Oh yeah. Make sure we're in focus. You can hear the wood cracking. There she goes. There she blows, I mean. So, that is obviously the same way you would just split wood with wedges for firewood, just more precise. Might be able to pull that right apart. Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful piece. Oh, nice and flat. Yeah, let's. I'm not sure which side I'll use. Ooh, about knocked that over. Okay. So that is really nice flat surface for a rive. Oh yeah, that's nice. Be nice and easy to plane. The bark is starting to get some fungi in it. I might just peel it right off. That's handy. And you don't have to take the bark off, but I usually do, especially if it's going to peel off anyway. The reason we leave these in the half round is because you want as much weight in this as possible. The heavier your green woodworking tools, the less stuff is going to bounce around. So it's a trade-off. If you have to move them around, if they're heavier, then it's more to carry. But I like heavy, very heavy green woodworking benches and tools. So that's your lovely. Sorry about the sun angle. Hopefully it's not too harsh. And that discoloration is where the end of the wood had been starting to dry out when it was setting on the ground. But see how flat that is? If you can find a piece like that, it makes your job a lot easier. You know, there's a little bit of a crack right there. Doesn't matter. Okay. So that's part one. That's riving the main body of the tool.